Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Panthers on the Plus. I'm your host, Nick Carboni, talking Carolina Panthers football. What a year to have started this venture. Panthers make the playoffs for the first time in 8 years, host their first home playoff game for the first time in a decade. What a scene it was. And thank you, by the way, for all of you that joined us on our pregame show here on the Plus. And joining me tonight, his second go-around on Panthers on the Plus, it is Will Palachik from WFNZ. He hosts pre and post for Panthers, Hornets, also the voice of your crown, your Charlotte FC, and we're going to talk about them because they, one playoff team finishes Saturday, the next one starts training Monday. I was like, can we give it a week? But no rest for the weary. Willie, just the scene on Saturday, and I was there, and now I'm going back to see what it looked like on the broadcast too, because I really thought that it shined through the TV cameras as well.
First of all, Nick, thank you so much for having me, and I agree with you. I haven't been here as long as a lot of people who were fortunate enough to see whether it was the run in 2015 or even further back to, the way things were, even in the early glory days of where the Panthers were. So I don't have a frame of reference as to what that stadium had looked like with Panthers prosperity. Only prosperity you could think of in that building and going to that building is what Charlotte FC has done. So it was great to see that and great to see a real raucous home atmosphere. And I'll even give credit to what happened during the Seattle game too, the final home game, because I watched that game from the stands as well. And really kind of started to feel that tide turn. I actually went to the game with my wife. She was in the stands. I was in the press box. But when we were driving in Uptown, I came right down Church Street from Trade, and I said to her, count the amount of Rams fans on our way in coming down Church Street. And it was less than 6.
Yep.
And once I saw that, I was like, this is going to be a different crowd. And they were loud from the moment the game started. They were loud before the game started, of course, with the Cam Newton moment, which, again, was incredibly well executed. Fact that it was, really right up to kickoff made it really, really deafening in there. They were loud on every third down when they were on defense. I think the pop you heard on the Jalen Coker touchdown was incredible. And even still, after the game, I think the general sentiment from everybody was that, no, they were not happy they didn't win, but I think the fact that they showed out their best selves, I think people kind of come away from this thinking mostly positively. Granted, there are some things that we can still dissect about what we didn't like about the way the year went, and I think some of the major problems that I think reared their ugly head during the season were personified during that loss. But at the same point in time, you lost to a pretty good football team, and I don't think you embarrassed yourself in the process. And more importantly, you had chances to win the football game late, which is an incredible statement of progress for this squad. And I think the fan base can be proud. And also a great shout-out, to the Panthers Entertainment folks, too, because when I say they pulled out all the stops, they literally did. The fact that they had not just the Cam stuff, which I know took a lot of great engineering and time-consuming stuff, I'm sure, and also great kudos to David and Nicole for reaching out to Cam and making that happen. But having all four of the guys who were Ring of Honor dudes come out in the fourth quarter or right before the fourth quarter to bang the drum too as well. It was a great statement of the heritage that this club brings, but also just how much appreciation they have for the fans, because it did feel like a real watershed moment, and also just something that I think any Panther fan who was there can look back and say, you know what, even though we did not win, it feels like the start of something big.
It would be fun to do it again soon, and no voice in that Panthers locker room from a player's perspective carries more weight than Derek Brown's, and he told his teammates 100%. And the media after the game, this is the standard now. And that phrase spread throughout the locker room to the point where everybody we went to a man, was saying that exact message. How can this be the standard now for Carolina? Are you confident it can be based on, they're not that separated from the other teams in this division, despite winning it for the first time in 10 years?
Well, I think it's fortifying the area. Number one, it's fortifying the areas where you've become strong, and also trying to enhance the depth of places that might still be lacking it. Derek Brown being healthy for the balance of the season is 100%, I think, a big achievement for them to not only hang their hat on when it comes to the progression of this defense, but also to, like you said, have somebody who's a big voice in that locker room and not just be a voice, but do so with his play. I think, on the opposite side of the football, Rob Hunt is the same kind of guy, and unfortunately, not too dissimilar to what happened with Derek Brown last season, you were very much missing Rob Hunt's leadership on the field on the offensive side of the football. And so I think to get him back for a full 2026 campaign is another step in the right direction. I think you have to go out and figure out how to plug some of those very glaring holes that you have on this football team. For example, on defense, you have to get coverage linebackers in order to get yourself at least able to play more in the scheme that Ejiro Evero wants to play, which very much got, I think, lambasted by the fan base at multiple times during the season, and of course during that final drive of the 2025 playoffs. I think you also have to figure out how to get more pressure on the quarterback without having to send the house, and that's enhancing the edge rush group and also just figuring out ways, different ways to scheme pressure against quarterbacks, because if you saw, the 3 games that went down to the wire over the course of this weekend, really the 4 games that went down to the wire, really, 3 of them down to the final possession, you saw the teams that got success defensively were the ones who put the most pressure on the quarterbacks. And as a result, the Panthers could not do that to Matthew Stafford. And again, Stafford's an MVP candidate for a reason, so he's able to evade those things. He had something like a 121 quarterback rating against pressure this year, so it's not as if he's not adept at handling those situations, but that's the task you have as far as the defense goes. And then in terms of the offense, it comes down to continuing to enable Bryce with more weapons and also protection from those weapons. And a big conversation piece going into the offseason, which we did not foresee going into Saturday, is what happens with the Ike Ekwonu situation, because the patellar tendon injury has got a wide variance of return times. There are some who've been able to come back with no time missed after an end-of-season patellar tendon injury, and then there's others who have gone into the season that have had certain situations and difficulties preclude them from starting the year. And it's hard to believe that you're not going to at least go into the season without some sort of question mark surrounding that left tackle position. So not only getting that part of it straightened out, but also trying to continue to fortify the depth there. And another pass-catching tight end / wide receiver, one or the other, I think could be the case, or even one of both, just to try and figure out how to best equip Bryce going into year 4. I think he'll get the 5th-year option, and now you basically have 2 years to determine whether or not this guy can be your future with more fortified weapons and a better team around him on the 2 main phases of the football team.
Perfect radio guy hits post for the first segment as I go over it, and then lays out all the topics we're going to dive into in a meaningful way, starting with Bryce Young, more with Willie P coming up on Panthers on the Plus. Back here once again on Panthers on the Plus with Will Palachik. Willie P from WFNZ carries throughout post-game shows for the Panthers and Hornets as well, and voice of Charlotte FC. Crown getting started back up training here on Monday. We'll have that talk in a few minutes. But Willie, you laid out all the topics great. Now I want to dive in and hammer down. Bryce Young.
Sure.
Did what he did in a wild card game mean more than perhaps other games in the season? Did it cancel some of the lumps out from his inconsistent year?
I think you still have to take the totality of it together, Nick, just because I think the one thing you have to see is less of those lumps. Like it's not insignificant that what he did on Saturday came in a playoff game. I think the only thing you can kind of point to in terms of things you'd wanted to see better from his line was the quarterback completion percentage. But at the same point in time, a lot of those incompletions were throwaways, and a lot of them came under pressure. You had 2 drops, and you had a couple of other scenarios where you had an intentional spike too. So from that perspective, it's like, okay, I'm not going to look at this and say that his line was awful. The one interception, I think you can kind of blame, almost kind of split the blame between him and Coker in that scenario, maybe a little bit more on Coker's side, maybe like in a 60-40 scenario there. But I think, again, you definitely look at this and say he is at least I think, quelled a lot of the negativity that surrounds him from a talking point standpoint, because I think he was good enough in enough moments this year to let you know, okay, there's something to work with here. Is the personnel around him great? Not necessarily 100%. I think you still need one more receiver. You need one more pass-catching tight end. The thing that I'm mad about, Nick, is the run game really kind of went almost to a waste in the final 3 weeks of the season.
Faded,
and that's something that has me more concerned going into the offseason of how do we get to a situation where this is balance is not the right word, but not as predictable and more enabling for Bryce to be better, because I know a lot of people want to think this has to go all on his shoulders, but any quarterback in the league that's not the top 3 or 4 or 5 needs collaboration around them and needs good situation stuff around them in order to be great. Bryce is no different than some of the others, even like last night with Caleb Williams. Like, he had good wide receivers, but he also had some good complementary football as well. So I think Bryce has definitely earned his stripes in year number 3. Was it a complete season? No, but I think what he did Saturday and in the good moments last season gives him, I think, enough credence to sit here and say there's definitely more to build on.
All right, let's talk about that run game, how it faded, but how the young pass catchers really rose to the challenge, culminating in that wild card weekend game where Ted Tyrone McMillan and Jalen Coker combined for 215 yards. Does this mean Dave Canales, and we'll get into play calling in a minute, needs to recalibrate where he leans in his offense? Whether it's, we know he wants to run, but it hasn't worked out as well as you would have liked in 2 years, and now he's got this ascending pass catching group.
Well, I think, Greg Olsen said something on the TV copy where he said, establishing the run can be a misnomer. It's more about making sure the ball gets into your playmaker's hands. And you saw a little bit of that with some of the pop passes to T-Mac and even to Coker as well. Like Bryce Young being the point guard means that the ball just needs to not be in his hands as much. And I think that's part of what we saw a little bit. And I think a lot of this is still developing with Dave. But at the same point in time, Chuba Hubbard is one of those guys, and for whatever reason, it just was not in his hands enough. And I think also the Rico Dowdle decline down the stretch needs to be studied a little bit more in terms of why that happened, whether Rico was just not 100% or they didn't have his confidence in him, or whether, just teams were more wise to the run fits, and it really put the Panthers at a bit of a disadvantage. I know he had Chuba had the one key drop too on the swing pass. Maybe it could have been a little bit better to throw from Bryce, but at the same point in time, that's when Chuba's got to haul in. I think it comes down to how do you go about getting the ball in your playmaker's hands first and foremost. I think you've established that your 2 top wide receivers are T-Mac and Jalen Coker. I know that Xavier Legette is somebody who they still think very, very highly of, but at the same point in time, it's a real troubling thing and a real troubling trend to see what happened to him down the stretch of the season and even throughout the 2025 season. He's going to be very much with a bullseye on his back and chest to figure out how do we go about looking at him and seeing what he can bring to the table, because if it doesn't get answered next season, I don't know if there's going to be many more for him or any more in a Panther uniform.
All right, let's talk play calling. And I've heard you talk about this on WFNZ. There are a lot of times when offensive coaches give up play calling. It is a desperation move. It is kind of a self-protection move. If Dave Canales does it, I almost think he's built up enough goodwill and as a culture builder that he could kind of not absorb a lot of heat for that. Do you think it'll happen? Do you think it needs to happen?
Split answer. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think Dave Canales would be wise to do it, and here's why. Like you said, I think he is garnered a lot of respect in that locker room. I think that they play for him. There's definitely a buy-in there, and he's earned that, and I think he's done very, very well to build that. At the same point in time, I don't think his hands are in enough parts of the football team to where he has a full grasp on the decisions that need to be made during the game globally. I think there were a couple times this season where he made reference to not really getting an explanation from referees on certain calls and things of that situation because he was too busy worrying about what he wanted to do next on offense. And I think that other situations where, I don't mind some of the play calls that are made when you are trying to be somewhat more risky. Like, I don't mind a lot of the fourth down calls he makes in terms of going for it. I just think a lot of times in those situations, if you're going to make that situation, I'd almost rather have somebody else making the play call because they're able to be emotionally detached from the decision that is to go for it, so that you're able to have at least a little bit of, I would say, some emotional attachment from that situation to make a more informed decision of, okay, are we able to run the football here? Are we able to pass the football here? It's going to be something, I think, a lot easier for somebody else to handle, as opposed to just the initial decision of, oh, let's go for it, let's not go for it, let's kick it. And I think, also having those conversations with other guys on the staff. He talked about Jim Caldwell on Monday or on Sunday when he talked about how helpful he is to him. That allows Dave to have more conversation with people on his staff of that ilk, to be at least more globally invested in the game as opposed to just being a play caller. There are not very many, I think, Nick, who can do it well both. On the same situation, being a head coach and offensive play caller. I think the number of people in the league who can do that is a non-zero number, less than 6. And I just don't think he's one of them. And I'm not saying that his job is on the line or should be on the line, but I think he'd be very well served to going outside the room and bringing in somebody who can take his offense, run it more efficiently, maybe not get as cute in some of these situations, be a little bit more pragmatic, and also arm Bryce with the ability to have the wherewithal to go about running this offense in a way that at least maximizes the best playmakers on this team.
All right, more with Will Palacic. We're talking defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero and all the things that are happening in that conversation coming up. More Panthers on the Plus. Again, this is our final episode of the 2025 season. I'm sure we will be back at various points, big points during the offseason as well. It was a fun first year. Every Monday night at 9 o'clock, we've come to you, and in the last couple of weeks, every night. And Will Palacic has been one of our repeat guests, and we hope to have him on again this offseason. Will, we just had a good discussion about Dave Canales and offensive play calling. Let's go defense now. What did you think of that final drive and the calls by Evero? And then we'll get into whether or not he's actually going to be back, because I don't think it's 100% like Dave Canales says it is. Listen, they were up 4. They were without J.C. Horn. I knew that's the defense he was going to call in that situation. It did not surprise me. Should he have?
And he's not the only defensive coordinator that plays these situations the way that he does. The thing that makes his defense great is that you allow the field to be compressed as you get closer and closer to the end zone. And the fact that you had a 4-point cushion meant that they were probably going to be very risk-averse and trying to keep everything in front of you. Unfortunately, it just felt like that cushion was maybe 4 or 5 yards too much at times, to where the Rams were able to really drive without impunity down the field. The thing that I also wanted to see more of is using the timeouts on the defensive side of the football as opposed to leaving them for the offense, because while leaving the offense less time and more timeouts might be good, knowing you only need 3, to me, I feel like if you have more I'd rather have the more time than the timeouts necessarily. I think if you're needing to get 4, then you need timeouts, because you need to get bigger chunks in that scenario as far as I'm concerned. But if you're going to be mad about the defense in the last drive of the game, you cannot come back and say you aren't very complimentary of the way they kept the team in the football game during the middle portion. The Mike Jackson interception, which bailed out the second failed 4th down call from Dave Canales, which, again, liked the decision, didn't like the play, didn't like going empty so close to the 50-yard line on a 4th and short. Didn't like that at all. But Mike Jackson gets the pick, ends up bailing out the defense. Bailing out the offense, I should say, and bailing out the head coach. And also just a couple of different stops that were made, even that when it came to the red zone efficiency numbers, Panthers were 4 for 4 in the red zone. Panthers got a red zone stop. That's something you have to look at and say was a big part of keeping them in the football game. So, again, I've been as big a critic of Evero as anybody's. I don't necessarily like the scheme. I don't think it's something that's a fireable offense. I do think a lot of it is determined by personnel, and like I said before, you need to cover linebacker, you need better pressure on the quarterback, but at the same point in time, maybe a management of the clock better in that situation might have given the Panthers a better chance of getting a comeback on the other side of the Rams score, because it looked like an inevitability that they were going to get it in the end zone.
All right, Dave Canales said yesterday that Evero will 100% be the defensive coordinator next year. And it's not that I don't believe Dave Canales. It's that I'm just not sure what's going on with this. His contract was expiring, although no, it wasn't. He signed an extension. We just didn't say anything about it. And now he's interviewing for head coaching jobs again, and he seems to be somebody who is constantly in those conversations. And I think he interviews well enough and has the respect that one of these teams with a vacancy may end up someday taking a chance, and that means because he's under contract with the Panthers, they would get compensatory picks, so that could be part of this too. What do you think about the whole kind of offseason conversation surrounding Evero?
I think he's still going to be back. While I definitely note that the jobs that he is, being talked about around are definitely ones that are intriguing. I don't think he gets the Falcon job. I think that's going to be a situation where John Harbaugh almost seems like a fait accompli there. Where's the other place he got?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, yeah, I don't know if that's one I look at and see is him, but that one might be a more likely one as far as I'm concerned than I think the Falcons. But at the same point in time, I feel like it's a situation where people want to see more. I think it's great that he's getting interviews, and I don't think the Panthers necessarily want to go away from that scheme. So for people who are like rooting for Ejiro Evero to get a head coaching job, I don't think there's a staunch departure from the scheme from Dave Canales' standpoint. So from that perspective, I think they're confident in what they are doing there. As far as whether or not he stays the coordinator, if I'm a betting man, I say he's probably here one more year.
All right, so what's you talked about left tackle. I mean, it rises immediately to the list of needs for this team, and they have to do something because they would love Ike Ekwonu to be back on the earlier end of that range that you spoke about. But I think that would need to be addressed in free agency instead of a draft and develop. You're not drafting one in the first round, so you're going to have to develop one. I think they need some sort of, not the priciest, splashiest left tackle on the market, but they're going to need something. What do you think?
I think you need to go get something of a veteran as a stopgap move, because obviously a lot of your depth on the line is kind of being shed. One of those guys could be Brady Christensen, because we know he can play left tackle, despite what Matt Rule thinks about him and his arm size. That could be one thing that you solve one problem by retaining a guy who I think is a big part of what you could bring to the table. I think his absence down the stretch is something that I think was under talked about, because I really thought he could have been a real big part and asset to losing Icky in that contest and not having to go to Yosh Nijman. I think Nijman didn't play all that bad, but again, it's a large step down from Icky. But I think you maybe do both. I think you can go and get somebody who's a stopgap, but maybe drafting the next tackle who can play in place of Taylor Moton. Taylor's not getting any younger, so you bring in somebody who can play one or the other, and also maybe even play flex into guard if you need him be as well. So I think it's something where maybe it's not a first-round pick, but a second or third. Wouldn't mind using that on an outside lineman who maybe can also flex inside as well. All
right, Willie. Training has begun, and there was a big announcement there in East Charlotte at the team HQ today. So what do we got? What's the announcement? What do we got on?
So the new training top is what I'm sporting right now. It's our friends at Thompson Child and Family Services, a fantastic nonprofit agency.
And that's the cool part, I thought, was a nonprofit,
Yeah, in Charlotte, which is something that you don't usually see with these type of partnerships. They do very, very great work in terms of foster care and trying to find homes for kids throughout the Charlotte area and Metro Atlanta. So something that is a 5-year plan that's going to kind of meld the club and Thompson to try and figure out new solutions for kids and youth in our area. And I think it's a great thing. And they'll obviously use the visibility of being on the training top to make people more aware of this great organization and being involved in the community. Very cool. All right, Willie. Great to have you. I'm sure we'll have you on again soon. Appreciate it, man. I forgot what I was going to say. You blew that out of the water right there, and it's been a long season. So appreciate you being on Panthers on the Plus. I'll think of it later, and I'll text you. But thanks for being here, buddy. Always good with you, Carboni. Appreciate you, man.
Yep. All right, that's it for Panthers on the Plus. Thanks for joining us all season. We will be back this offseason, free agency, draft, and all that stuff too. Thanks.